We are going to begin with my favorite cleansing technique. If you had 10 crystal healers and you asked each of them to describe their favorite method for cleansing, you'd probably get 30 answers, which goes to show that there's more than one way to do anything in the crystal world. And if you take nothing else away, other than that I really like science, I'm also hoping that you will feel empowered to explore the techniques that work for you and to not necessarily buy into the idea that there is a rigid black and white set of rules that we have to follow with crystals. There are guidelines that work in most cases for most people. There are guidelines that don't work for hardly anyone, and most things are going to be comfortably in the middle. So we understand why we cleanse. Crystals have memory. They remember things we might not find useful at a given moment. It doesn't need to remember that time I was stuck in traffic last week and really agitated, especially if I'm working on cultivating inner peace, right? Those two energies could be counterproductive. So we just wipe the slate clean. So we have a fresh start. So my favorite method for cleansing uses the breath. And there are lots of reasons why we might prefer the breath. Some things can bleach in sunlight. Others can be damaged by salt. Some could be scratched by other crystals. Some could be injured by water. So the beautiful thing about the breath is that it is safe for virtually all crystals. Are there delicate specimens in my collection, or even when I work in a museum, that if I breathed on vigorously might break off things? Yes. I'm not carrying them around, so I don't really have to worry about that. I'm going to use a different method for cleansing. The utility of breath is important because we're not going to break anything more than likely, at least nothing we're going to seriously work with. But there's another reason I really like the breath. Sometimes you want to cleanse and it's not the full moon. Sometimes you're out in public and you happen to just leave your 3-foot Tibetan gong at home. Sometimes you're traveling and you can't burn your favorite incense of your choice, right? So how do we cleanse in those circumstances? Well, you always have your breath. And if you don't have your breath, cleansing your crystal's not your number one priority, right? Like we'll do things that are more urgent first. So supposing you can breathe on something and you have your breath, which is almost all of the time, you can use this technique. So that's why we're going to start with it. So the first thing we have to do is learn how to breathe. And I'm sure we think we know how to breathe, and we do for general life, but there's a specific way we can breathe that will do something weird. It will generate a very small amount of electricity. Now, our bodies are constantly producing electricity and magnetism and a bunch of other things. But if we breathe in a specific way, the kind of ionic charge, the kind of electricity that we generate is slightly higher than average. It would require extraordinarily sophisticated equipment to measure this because the volume of electricity produced by your body as a whole is much, much louder than just this one little bit of you and your breath. So don't worry about trying to figure that out. But this technique is inspired by Marcel Vogel's work. He was a really big influence on me. The breathing part is going to consist of 2 sections: attuning to our intention with the breath, and then projecting the intention with the breath. So the attuning part is easy. Breathe with whatever way is comfortable for you, but just imagine that your goal is coming in with the breath. So for me, that's cleansing. For this technique, for all of us, it's cleansing. Maybe you're going to visualize something that symbolizes cleansing to you. I do a pure white light. Because it's broad spectrum, white light is actually the whole spectrum. It's not white, it's very colorful. So it's got whatever we need to balance it. And think of that crisp white linen or a white room with nothing inside it. It's pure potential. It's fresh, it's clean. If you're a tactile person, maybe you'll think of a fresh breeze on your face, or dangling your feet in a mountain stream, or the sensation of a hot shower. If you've got some other sensory input that symbolizes cleansing to you, a particular aroma or sound, use that. Although I'm going to say visualize or picture, not all of us are hardwired to have good visual skills. And I don't want you to feel like you can't do this just because you can't hold an image in your head. You actually can. So do whatever technique is going to work for you. And maybe that's a combination. So part 1, we close our eyes, we set our intention, and we draw in that visualization or that other sensory input. You can choose to hold the crystal for this or not, that's up to you, but we're just going to take a few deep breaths in and out. No particular science to it, just breathing at a rate that's comfortable. And with every in-breath, imagine that you're drawing in that purifying force more and more. As you exhale, just exhale anything that stands in the way of cleansing, purifying. And when we feel like we're a sponge that has been wrung out of all the ick and we're just full of all that purifying energy, now we're ready to do the cleansing breath. So before we do that breath, we want to hold our crystal in a way that is useful. If you have a normal crystal, I'm not holding a normal one, it's been eroded, but let's say I've got one like this, it's got 6 sides in cross section, more or less has a top and a bottom. It could have 2 points, that's fine. We want to hold it, if it's comfortable, between thumb and forefinger of one hand. And with a natural quartz crystal, it's got 6 sides. So with my thumb and forefinger of my other hand, I'm just going to pick any 2 faces. But what if you have something that's not a natural quartz crystal? Maybe you've got a sphere like this, there's only one side. Well, I mean, just put your fingers wherever it feels good. And if you happen to have a good old-fashioned rock like this, maybe you'll do thumb and forefinger. When all else fails, just hold it in the palm of one or both hands. Those are all options for you. The reason we make this kind of almost like mudra with a quartz crystal is because attaching ourselves to these endpoints of the axes of the lattices in them, we actually create a little electrical circuit. But if your crystal's shaped differently, don't worry about it. We're going to rely on more than just the electromagnetism here. We're going to rely on the spiritual energy, which doesn't map to the same points on the crystal necessarily. So we hold the crystal in a way that is effective and comfortable, stressing comfort over anything. We're already super saturated with that energy. Let's just, since we took a break here, let's take a couple deep breaths in and out to reinforce that cleansing vibe. And now I'll show you what the breath looks like. Then I'll describe the breath in words, and then we're going to do it together. So it looks quite boring. From far away, it's not going to look like much. It's just a short, sharp pulse through the nose. Now we're not going to force, like you shouldn't feel your ears pop, your eyes shouldn't feel like they're going to burst from your sockets. Don't do anything that's going to stress out your cardiovascular system, but it is a rather short, forced exhale. Your whole breath is not going to come out in one little pulse. We just need a little bit of resistance. And it is that resistance as the air moves through the nasal passages very quickly that's going to generate this kind of Talveg, a spiral movement that also generates electricity. So there is an electrical component to this. There's also a component we can't measure, the spiritual stuff. So let's try this together. Hold the crystal in a way that's comfortable. Remind yourself of that cleansing energy you've got within. And then we're going to connect to the crystal. So you might do that by looking at it. Maybe you're going to visualize it inside. Maybe you're just going to hold the idea of the crystal in your mind. And then we're going to take a deep breath, filling our lungs with that cleansing vibe, and release it in a short, sharp pulse through the nose. If you're like me working with a quartz crystal with 6 sides, I'm going to turn it and do another breath, holding on to the next 2 faces. If you have a slab like this that you've been holding in your palm, maybe you'll just flip it over. If you've got some other shape, adapt to what you need, but I'm going to do a second breath. So let's repeat, breathing in that white light or other cleansing energy, connecting and pulsing. And once more, I have 6 faces. If you don't have to do a third breath. That's up to you. But I'm going to repeat once more, breathing in that cleansing energy. connecting and releasing the breath in a pulse. And now you've got a cleansed and cleared crystal.